You are never alone. You are never alone. Just reach into your heart and Allah is always there. You are never alone. You are never alone. Through sorrow and through grief, through happiness and peace, you are never alone.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a new episode of Family Issues. Dear brothers and sisters, upon your request, we're going to continue for the second consecutive episode here in the program, our series on getting our kids ready for exams. This is exam time, so we're going to examine again and talk further about how to get our children ready for exams, how can we provide them the best atmosphere, and what are the tips that we can give them to be ready for exam time, so that we make sure that all our children achieve the best they can during exam time. We'll be ready, as always, to receive your phone calls live here in the program. Our phone numbers will be appearing on the screen. We'll also be ready to receive your Facebook comments via the address that you'll also be seeing on the screen. We already have received a number of your comments, and we'll be reading them out in the program here as we progress. We're also be waiting for your emails. Your comments and suggestions are always useful to us. Remember that you are the ones, dear brothers and sisters, that choose the topics. And again, upon your request, we're still talking about how to get our kids ready for exams. In this episode, we are delighted to have with us Sheikh Zaid Al-Ansari, and he's the head of the Institutional Research Department at the American University in Cairo, a renowned Islamic da'iyah. Thank you very much, Sheikh Zaid, for being with us. Jazakumullahu khairan.
Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Let me just mention that for all my friends and viewers and my wonderful colleagues at AUC, I've decided to make the transition from AUC to another exciting university here in Egypt, and I'll tell you more about that soon, inshallah.
Inshallah, Sheikh Saeed, best of luck in the field of da'wah. Sheikh, where do you want us to get started here when we talk about getting kids ready for exams?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. First, I'd like to look at the camera and to see if my children are still studying at this time of night, because it resonates with me. All of my children are getting ready for exams, and one of the advices that I have for parents is to know which role to play when your children are preparing themselves for this high stress period, to examine their performance that is accumulation of what they've done the entire school year. So one of the things that we should remember in a supportive role as a coach for our children is that this is a very stressful period for them. And they have to remember and synthesize a lot of information and material and be able to perform under stress and remember this material so they can score well on these exams. So one of the most effective things that we can do for them is to coach them well. And, you know, I'm not a big proponent of teaching or preparing for the exam per se. If a student is well-rounded in the course material and understands how to connect the dots of the important learning outcomes in the course, then the exam is a litmus test of a type to demonstrate their proficiency and competency. So as I say, you know, our best role as parents is to be involved all year long with the learning process and not wait until the 11th hour of the exam and put our child under more stress that we expect for them to do well, but to be with them as a coach the entire year, understand the subjects that they're taking, understand the personality of the school and the personality of the teachers, so we can coach our children effectively to reduce the pressure that they feel so that they'll go in the exam and perform well, inshallah.
Beautiful. And usually, Sheikh, is that the responsibility of the father or the mother or both, and what?
Well, for practical purposes, because a lot of fathers are out of the home for extended hours because of work, the mother plays a very primary role. But that doesn't diminish the role that the father should play in stepping up in a supportive capacity to reinforce maybe rules and discipline and consistency, and also help the mother with logistics and management of time to make sure that the child is maximizing time. And this is one of the very important things during the exam period, is efficiency and maximization, optimization of time to be able to, get home from school, change clothes, have a snack. My children go to tutoring before they get home, so they don't get home until 6 o'clock. And so and then we want them in bed by 8:30. So that's 2 hours and a half they've got to eat and do a lot of things. So there has to be an efficiency in the household of expectations of where they go every half hour. So the parents have to organize that. Because my son would, he would eat his snack and then start some interesting things that he thought were interesting instead of studying. So this is something that the parents have to really pay attention to.
Right. And you mentioned something very important when you said, don't wait for the 11th hour of the exam. This process of monitoring your kids' work has to be a year-long, year-round process.
Yes.
But for those who haven't done that, and we know that many of our viewers now, might have missed on monitoring or helping or assisting or even organizing in the best way they could the appropriate atmosphere for their kids. Now is the 11th hour. What do they do?
Well, they should know that, major studies in learning theory have demonstrated that the best way to increase long-term memory is to study for 45 minutes and take 15-minute breaks. Marathon studying, trying to cram in a lot of, quantitative, detailed information, it will increase one's ability in bursts of short-term memory, but in long-term memory, if the exam, let's say, a week away, and somebody crams for 4, 5, 6 hours, there's a chance that they'll only retain a very small percentage of that. But incrementally, if they study for 45 minutes, 15-minute break, 45 minutes, 15-minute break, 45 minutes, 15-minute break, and then find something that's relaxing. Because, under stress, we forget. Sometimes you forget where you're driving if you're under stress. So at the 11th hour, we should first make a resolve, make a resolution that we're going to correct this problem and not let it happen again. But if we find ourselves at the 11th hour and we're trying to get a lot of material done, my mother always said something that was very interesting. It's a cinch by the inch, but it's hard by the yard. So you have to break it down into smaller pieces. And even at the 11th hour, break the learning assignments down into smaller units that your child can consume. but keep those limited to 45 minutes.
Right. Sheikh, is there such a thing as an ideal time period that kids, where kids must study according to their age all year long after they go back from school? I know that you might have a different educational system, and schools are different, and the American system is different from the Egyptian or the British or the French or whatever. But is there such a thing as an ideal,
You know what I don't see done anymore? Because, we know from learning theory and we know from human physiology that we begin to decline our resilience and our mental capacity in mid-afternoon. And if you don't take a pause or a nap or some kind of relaxation, you just don't have the capacity to remember and retain information. When I was coming up, I think educators knew this. And so there was a break mid-morning in classes in something called study hall. And it was a open room where children went from, you had 2 periods of class. Started the first period where you got the instructions for the day. You went to your first class. After your first class, you went to a study hall. And in the study hall, you could take your homework and other assignments when you were fresh in the morning and focus on preparing your lessons for the next day or the next class. I notice in my children, by the time that they get home and they're carrying these big heavy book bags, they're traveling for long distances on the bus. Sometimes they even nap on the bus. By the time that they get home, they're physically worn out. They're mentally fatigued. And so we need to look carefully at, as parents, and get involved with the school systems where our children are in school, and try to encourage thoughtful rethinking about how people best learn. I'm not too sure that children under the age of 15 or 16 have the capacity to grind it out for 9-10 hours a day and then be expected to do well with homework at night. Just the physiology of young bodies, I don't think are prepared for that.
Now, Sheikh, talking here about the appropriate atmosphere. In your view, what is the appropriate atmosphere that parents must bring about to their kids? Again, suppose you have older and younger kids, you have babies in the house, you have visitors, you have you have a small house, everybody's mingling and mixing all the time. How do we make for an appropriate atmosphere, especially in exam time?
Well, bismillah, alhamdulillah. I think you have to set the expectations. You have to set the ground rules. In my house, there are ground rules that, the computers for games go off. Your friends don't knock on the door. If the telephone rings, it's not for you. It's for somebody else, because you're not talking to anybody. And here is a time that you need to focus on. Instead of Facebook, put your face in a book.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay? And consume this material that is the tarbiyah that you need to grow into a mature Muslim adult so that you can perform properly when you're expected to perform in your adult years. This is the training ground.
Yes.
So I think we have to set the expectations. Here's what's happening between 4 and 7 o'clock in my house, Sunday through Thursday, no exception.
But it does take it's difficult. I mean, that discipline is not everybody can apply this, and we know that this is the ideal, but realistically, when you come to facts on the ground, this discipline usually brings about fights between kids and parents, and then you might have a smaller kid who doesn't have to study that much, so he could be annoying the older kid, and the older kid would be asking himself, why am I not playing just like him, and a lot of
But this is
stories.
where you and I have
would
to
arise.
step in and be the referee.
Right.
I have a mischievous 6-year-old that knows he can push the button of his 11-year-old brother who's got to do math and science and stuff. And he knows that he's got free time, right? So I have to step in and tell him, Saleh, Abdullah has to focus. You need to chill and leave him alone, okay? And reinforce that by, some kind of boundary. And you have to be flexible with it. You don't have to be, with the shaddid. But you can be very clear about, here's what my expectations are, for you to give your brother the support he needs. I've got another, female, younger child that doesn't have those same expectations. And her older siblings have to struggle with the same thing. So there has to be boundaries. And we have to be the coach and the referee and the disciplinarian all at the same time. I don't believe that there are uncontrollable contingencies that people call reality that are disruptive. No, there are contingencies that can be mediated by our intervention, by the parents'
Indeed.
intervention.
Although we have to admit that referees are usually not very popular, especially during match time.
Yeah, but during this time of year, I'm not running for a popularity contest. We can be friends and buddies in the summer, but during this time of year, I need to be the coach and the referee.
Right. Speaking of the summer, I mean, for those who have missed out on monitoring and following and helping their kids throughout the year, and maybe for those who saw their kids, getting some scores that they think are not worthy of them. I mean, you'll find many parents telling you, well, my kid got an 80, but I believe he should get a 95. For those parents, I mean, what do they do in the summer? I mean, could summertime also be one where the learning process, the academic learning process continues, or should summertime be vacations and holidays and away from anything serious?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think really, the objective of learning, it doesn't have to be at the same intense level as during the school year, but the summertime has to have some structure, some kind of learning experience. My younger children had a one-day break. They were out of school the day before yesterday. No, Thursday was their last day. So they had the weekend. And we had to register them yesterday. This morning, 7 o'clock, they were up, out to a summer program. Okay? Basically, Tarbiyah, Quran, and Tajweed. But in the long run, and they have some time in the afternoon to enjoy themselves. But I think in the long run, parents have to look at the summertime as an opportunity to tweak and adjust the capacity of their child to get what they may have missed during the school year. Algebra. I think, math and science and fundamentals that the child maybe has struggled with during the school year, this is a perfect time to sit down with them for just a couple of hours, maybe an hour every week, in front of like something like the Khan Academy, where there are video instructions. I did this with my son the other night. It was amazing. He had a problem with fractions. And I wanted to show him an independent resource that he could use instead of just waiting on me. So I said, let's get this Khan Academy video and let's go through solving common denominators, how to do that together. And 60 seconds into the video, I saw the lights come on in his head. He got it. So he knew where the site was. Now he's downloading. He's got the energy to look at it for himself. So during the summer, it's a wonderful time to encourage that. Independent learning, find out where your child had the gaps and the resource problems during the year, and sit with them and support that. Not for a long time, but use the summer as this time to cultivate that weak skill.
Right. Very important, the point about independent learning, but at the same time you mentioned that parents should monitor and follow. So there is a balance that
Absolutely.
that must always be struck there.
I have another analogy
yes.
for you from the world of sports. Learn to dribble with your other hand. You cannot be successful with a weak skill. So if there is a skill deficit in, let's say, numeracy, or a skill deficit in reading, the summer is a perfect time to learn to dribble with the other hand.
Right.
To build that skill deficit.
Beautiful. But Sheikh, dear brothers and sisters, we have some tips that have been prepared by our team here in the program that we want to go through with practical exam tips. First one is about, of course, remember Allah and make dua. Remember Allah whenever you are, wherever you are, and ask Him to make everything easy for you and ask Him for success. You have to do that every time, not at the time of exams only, of course, subhanallah. Pens and pencils. Some exams require the use of pens, while others have to be completed in pencil. Make sure you know what you should be using in every paper before you go in. Let's stop here and all right, take spares, take spare pens and pencils just in case the one you are using stops working. And we can also see on time, not in time, allow for problems, hold-ups and traffic jams on the way, and make sure, this is of course for the parents, and make sure you arrive with time to spare so that you can go in calmly rather than in a frantic rush. And the last one, it may be stupid, but don't forget to read the instructions and make sure you know what you are being asked to do. You should go into the exam well aware of what is expected of you. But you should always check. Don't, however, waste a lot of time on this.
Very good advice.
Sheikh, let's go through them one by one. Pens and pencils. A lot of kids like to use pens, and I used to be like this, and not pencils. How do we, certainly every subject is different from the other. The neat handwriting and the neatness of the paper, how does this affect the grades, and what does it tell us about the child, the kid? You might have a very brilliant kid whose paper is, messy, and another one who's really careful with a very neat paper, but he doesn't say much in the answers. Of course, the ideal thing would be to have it both, but
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Having graded tons of papers myself, the first thing that I think the student should be taught is that if you make it easy for the teacher to read what you've written.
Mm.
The teacher is not going to be irritated and frustrated. You want to make it as easy as possible for that teacher to understand and know what you're talking about. So writing it clearly and legibly, making it coherent, and making your point, of course, takes skill and practice. Okay? Doesn't happen on the day of the exam. The other thing, I'm a big proponent of pencils. To me, pencils are more consistent with the nature of the human being to make a mistake. So you can erase your mistake and start again.
Right.
So I would encourage if it requires pens, have a pen. But if you have the option, have a pen and a pencil. So you can erase your mistakes or rethink something in a better way and relate it on the exam paper.
Right.
But all of these tips that you guys, your team prepared, are very good logistic tools that I think, if you look at what was organized, starting with the dua, it's all very necessary for the person to have the same framework that when they're preparing themselves, with Allah's assistance, and then these organizational tips. To use what's in their mind effectively, they have to have good organization, good logistics. So when they walk in that exam room, they're not hit by surprises. The last one was extremely important.
Yes. Don't forget to read the instructions and make sure you know what is asked of you. And you should always check, but don't waste a lot of time on that.
How many times have I looked at a student, I have an essay on an exam, and the student writes 4 pages of something that's sparkling and brilliant, but not even related to the question. And then they wonder, why didn't I do well on this question? I made beautiful points. Yeah, you made beautiful points about something else, but not about this question.
Maybe in that case, from an ex-student, we are all ex-students.
Answer the question.
Exactly, but some students, because they've studied some chapters or have a good knowledge in some areas very well, and this is the area of their excelling, they just want to put this on the paper because they know they're weak on other spots.
Yeah, I know.
So, but that would be, I know it's a sort of cheating.
Yes,
but,
it was,
but
and this is one of the problems of studying for the exam. Because the exam is something that, we're not telling the students what's going to be on it. We expect for them to have broad, generalized knowledge so they can respond to anything that we present to them.
Another important point is the checking. We have a lot of other tips that we'll be talking through with Sheikh Zaid Al-Ansari. But after we do take this break here in the program, dear brothers and sisters, do stay with us. We'll be back shortly, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Never alone. You are never alone. You are never alone.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. Before we progress, dear brothers and sisters, with Sheikh Zaid here, let's read some of your Facebook comments that you sent to us, and we'll be reviewing together further tips, more tips. We'll be discussing them in detail in the second segment here of the program, but just we're showing you here some of the messages we got. Kimu Czech saying excellent topic, thank you very much. Sister Ilham this comes on time. You really need such a topic to be discussed. I hope I'll have the time to watch it, or maybe I should make the time. May Allah reward you all. Thank you very much. May Allah reward you. And you know that the program has a re-airing slot as well. So we hope you can catch us in our re-airing slot, if not live. Ngengo Makoti says, wonderful topic, thank you very much. And Sister Noor Saab says, nice program, I like it, Jazakumullahu khairan wa jazaki khairan, sister. Sheikh Zaid, the point about checks, you should always check, but don't waste a lot of time on this. This is a double-edged sword, if you will, not checking or not checking. You have a lot of brilliant students, because they don't check, they make some very silly mistakes, and if they just, checked for 10 or 20 seconds, they would have corrected those. On the other hand, you have some students who could answer just 1 or 2 out of 5 questions, say, in an exam, and keep checking and keep rechecking because they want to have it perfect answers. So they just focus on 2 questions and they leave out the other 3. So how do we strike the balance here? That's one. The second point is, if you have easy questions and difficult questions, which do you start with, and how do you divide your time?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A lot of it has to do with the temperament and the preparation of the student. My general advice would be, start with the difficult questions first. And make sure that you understand the question, and don't play with yourself. don't toy with. If you know you do not know anything about this question, move on. Move on to low-hanging fruit.
But you'll have others telling you, start with the easy ones, just put them in the basket, score some points, just go finish them as quickly as you can, and that's another 3 years.
Well, sometimes exams are weighted. There is point weight to the exam. Then you should know before the exam
how you should distribute your time.
How you should distribute your time. This exam, let's say that for the 2 questions about the density of water, the property of water, in a physics class. The professor is going to weight this is going to be 30% of the exam.
So it should be naturally more or less 30% of the time.
Exactly, exactly. So spend the appropriate time on the way that the exam is weighted. But there has to be some kind of engagement with the teacher before the exam. You're not trying to cheat, but you ask important questions about how this exam is, how many questions, is it going to be true and false, multiple choice, is it going to be essay, is there going to be oral? So know completely what the exam is going to be and how it's weighted.
There must be flexibility there as well, right? I mean, I can't say it's because it's 50% of the exam, I will give it 50% of the time, because I might have other questions that I could answer, in a longer or in a shorter time, right? There has to be some flexibility, right?
There has to be. You're exactly right. And from your experience as a student, and I would say the same for myself, when you're well prepared, you can sit down and scan across the exam questions. And okay, I can really ace these questions quickly. Here's a question I have to spend more cognitive time on, more mental energy on. Okay, just because, and it comes up to your disposition, your style, your personal style. You have to know that. I don't like surprises. I'm a meticulous planner. And I don't like surprises, so I would start with the things that have the highest hanging fruit, things that I have to make more effort for. But then again, comes down to flexibility, as you said, and know yourself.
Because I mean, if you start with with the most difficult, then you could be out of mood. Somewhere in the exam. I mean, if you mess it up, if you know it's not working,
well, then
you would have to leave it, right? You have to leave it.
You have to know when to move on. sometimes, based on the personality of the student, you can get lulled into a false sense of security with easy questions first. And then wait till the hard questions and kapow, you're in trouble. You feel like you're in trouble. So it's based on knowing your style, knowing yourself. And if you're a parent, knowing your child and giving your child the appropriate encouragement and coaching of what to expect on the exam.
Right. Now, Sheikh, another tip is get a good night's sleep before the exam. But the question that I'm sure a lot of viewers are asking themselves, there is a chapter still missing here. The kid has to study just a bit more. So what do we sacrifice? The hour of sleep or the hour of revision? It will always pop up.
Yeah, well, you won't get it sleeping. If there's something that needs to be done, it needs to be done. And, I think that nutrition plays into this well, as long as in addition to sleep. Proper hydration, proper drinking of fluids. You live in Cairo, and you know what this heat can do to your capacity to perform, to be fatigued. So I think, if there's a choice between spending the next hour learning the material or going to bed and forgetting it, I would prefer spending the hour.
That's for certain age categories, or generally speaking, starting from?
Well, I would say from the 5th grade through high school, the child's old enough to spend that next hour. If they could, let's say, my children get up between 6 and 6:30. So if he has to go to bed at 9 instead of 8, I think it's well worth it.
What if he has to go at 11 instead of 10?
That
would be way too late.
Way too late. Way too late. I don't know what children are doing at that hour of night. Any child who, I don't like to be up that hour at night. Although I see work and I have to do, and sometimes I'm charged up and I stay up. But any young child, I would recommend 9 o'clock, lights out.
Indeed. Another difficult question, and now you're a parent, you're driving your kid to school for exam time, but breakfast isn't ready as of yet. So again, what do you sacrifice? Do you sacrifice 10 minutes of the exam, or do you sacrifice that sandwich or that orange, or this is life. I mean, this is how it is.
This is how it is.
Not everything is always in place.
When it comes to,
and we're the referee. You said we're the referee, and we're the, so what decision do we make? How do we go about that?
If you can on the way swing through the on-the-go store and grab a banana or grab an apple or grab a bottle of water, and you can use that 10 minutes to help the child prepare in the car or something, then that's a judgment call. I think we have to be flexible. There's no rigid rule.
Right.
There's the flexibility that you have to seize upon to make the best out of a difficult situation.
Right. Now any specific advices on tackling the right and wrong answer? You have sometimes those questions where at the very end you'll be saying right or wrong for that sentence or that idea. Any specific tips when tackling such questions? And I think usually these types of questions have a bigger weight than the time you have to spend on. Usually.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My rule of thumb is for positive questions that are looking for a criterion of right or wrong. If they're stated in the positive, if they're not stated in a negative, if they're stated in the positive, and the end of the question is looking for a right or wrong, it's usually the criterion is right. For a negative question that's looking for a criterion of right or wrong, is usually the affirmation of the negative. Okay? And that has a lot to do with the pedagogy of just how you present the knowledge. You know, teachers don't spend a lot of time trying to trick students, but because of the methodology of how you synthesize knowledge for people to understand important concepts, there's a way that you construct questions to make sense out of the concept that you try. You know, you have to remember this, and you have to, you know, the student has to get to know this. A question, 7 or 8 questions about a topic, are all related to the construct or the concept of that topic. Some verify the topic, some reject the topic. So the student has to have a global understanding, a broad understanding of why am I answering questions about this topic? Why is this important? And therefore the questions then become more understandable.
Right. Now, naturally, the right and wrong questions, like the multiple choice questions, could involve at times a guessing game. I mean, if you have absolutely no idea about the answer, whether this is right or wrong, or that multiple choice, maybe it's out of A, B, C, D. You know, it's not A or B, but you're confused between C and D. Do you advise that kids would guess if it's not stated that, you know, there will be deduction of points for wrong answers? And sometimes it is the case in right or wrong, especially, I think.
Yeah.
So, first of all, do you favor that? Do you favor deducting points if there is a wrong answer, so as to make sure that kids, you know, don't guess, at least get a draw instead of losing the match? Or do you would you naturally, you know, leave some questions to guessing, although that would not lead to a very accurate judgment of the real level, you know, of all students. And naturally, exams are not, you know, the real, you know, they give you an indication. But not the thermometer. I mean, it's not a thermometer.
Well, to design, in my opinion, to design exams like that is to tap the student on the knuckles with a ruler. It is punitive. I don't think it enhances learning at all. It makes it easier for the teacher if there's deduction of points was the wrong answer. It makes it easier for the teacher to grade, but it does nothing in capturing student learning outcomes. To me, it's lazy. It's laziness on the part of the teacher. So I would never construct a question like that. I would structure a meaningful question that would indicate the breadth and depth of the student's knowledge according to that question. Either they know it or they don't.
Now for, you know, our kids that, you know, have 90 plus grades or 80 plus grades or 70 plus grades or 60 plus grades, for each of them, as we wind up here, say they're having these grades while they are, say, in grade 5, 6, or 7. And I'm mentioning that age category specifically because, you know, I think that KG1 and KG2 and grade 1 and grade 2 are not so indicative as could be grade 4, 5, 6, or 7. What do we, you know, how do we use that information? Say my kid is getting 60s all the time, 60 out of 100, or 90 out of 100. What do I do with the information I got?
Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One of the things you should know about, is this a result of the poor delivery of content from the teacher? And if, let's say that, you don't have a normal distribution, you don't have a curve in a class. It's skewed to the right. Everybody's getting 90s and 100s. Then you know this is social promotion and grade inflation. And this is just as much of a disservice to the learning goals of the student and the school as it is that students are making 60s and 70s and are not performing.
Mm.
So it takes a careful examination, if there is a good number of students, not just your child or my child, but a good number of students that are getting 60s and 70s, something's wrong with instruction.
Right.
Because we're looking at a normal distribution.
Should we be entitled as parents to know the exact grades of all students in my kids' class?
Absolutely, yes.
Because you're telling us that this is the best way to measure. Say you have 20 or
that
something.
Kind of transparency,
So,
kind of transparency tells you a lot about the quality of instruction. If you expect no more at both ends of that distribution, 5%, extreme excellence and extreme failure, right? Because that's how randomly things are normally distributed. But if you're getting clusters of a bunch of 60s and 70s, or a bunch of social promotions of 90s and 100s, then it's time to go in and sit down and talk to the principal and the teacher about what the expectation is and the delivery of educational content in that class.
All right. On that note, of course, that subject will never, can never be closed, and it will always stay open. Unfortunately, dear brothers and sisters, that's all the time we have for this episode. We do thank you again for choosing that topic. It is exam time. It is an exciting topic, isn't it? And we do thank on behalf of you, Sheikh Zaid Al-Ansari, renowned Islamic Da'iyah and head of the Institutional Research Department at the AUC. It's always a pleasure, Sheikh Zaid, to have you with us. Jazakumullahu khairan. Barakallahu feekum. Waiting to see you again, inshallah. And thank you, dear brothers and sisters, for watching Family Issues. Please do keep your emails flowing. Your comments and suggestions always mean a lot to us. And do remember that you are the ones picking the topics here. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we are waiting for you, inshallah, same time next week. Until we meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Never alone, you are never alone. Through sorrow and through grief, through happiness and peace, you are never alone. So now, as you long for your past, prepare for your future, but knowing nothing's gonna last. You see, this life is but a road, a straight and narrow path to our final abode. So travel well, O Muslim, and paradise will